The good news for everyone outside is it's not snowing just yet when we're recording this. Welcome into a dry edition of Hog Roundup. That's ESPN Arkansas's Ty Richardson. As always, I'm Evan Kamiko. Ty, it feels like we've been anticipating this snowstorm the entire week. There's been a lot to go on, a lot to talk about where you've got Ryan Silverfield's class, the national championship game, NFL divisional round happening last week, the championships this weekend. But we're talking basketball right now. Ty, thanks for joining us as always.
Happy to jump on. I know we got a lot to discuss, so let's get to it.
Sweet. Let's start with this Vandy game. I mean, absolute domination by Arkansas, 93 to 68, I should say. That's the final score. What's your biggest takeaway on a night where the fan base showed out really big, the students were there early, and everything seemed to go Arkansas's way?
I think you got to start with the defense. You hold a Vanderbilt team to under 70 points. This is a highly explosive offensive team. You really stopped the two Tylers, which was a big deal. They just combined for 28 points. And then you have six guys in double figures on the offensive end. You get up and down. I think they exceeded 40 plus paint points. So Arkansas just pounded Vanderbilt. They've lost three straight. I'm curious what happens to them tomorrow. A team that was started, I believe, 16-0 and now has fallen in three straight games in SEC play.
What I think impressed me is you mentioned paint points, and I thought the ball movement early on from Arkansas was really good. A lot of really great back cuts. I think Carter Knox had a couple of them. Chuck Martin was talking about that this morning. But assists, again, it feels like here's the trend. When Arkansas passes the ball, spreads the wealth around 25 times or more a game, they tend to win those games. You look at kind of that game against South Carolina, 27 assists. At Georgia, 13. And then this Vanderbilt game, 25 assists. So 25 is the number to hit. But I asked Cal after the game, I'm like, you like playing like that? And he goes, I don't really like playing like that. Which is kind of strange because it's like, well, when they play like that, they win the game. And when they don't, well, we've seen what happens.
Yeah, assist-wise, you love that you had the number, and I want to say the Razorbacks only either had 7 or 10 turnovers to go along with that. Vanderbilt had one or the other, I forget. But I think when you look at what Arkansas basketball has been at its best, it's when you have multiple guys in double-digit figures because you have multiple players on this roster that can score. Billy does it a different way than Malik Ewan and Malik Thomas, and I think it's one of those things where if Arkansas can do that on the road in Gainesville or Tuscaloosa, you're going to give yourself a chance to win a very, very big-time road basketball game. But you got one at home tomorrow against LSU, and we'll see what happens there.
Yeah, we'll get to that one. But again, how important is it for this team itself? You know, we know the ceiling. We know what the expectation is for these guys in the room, and it's get to the national championship game. But you've got to place yourself well in SEC play, and certainly beating a top 25 teams, top 20 team, top 15 team. Vandy was ranked 15, I believe, in the AP poll this week. How important is that to set the tone now for kind of a question mark game that we'll get to in just a second?
Well, it's a quad one win. You want to brace for what's coming middle to end of February when you have those road games I alluded to in Tuscaloosa and Florida, a home game against Texas A&M. I mean, those are not easy basketball games. And the Aggies are probably the surprise of the SEC. Florida's starting to get hot. Even Kentucky next weekend, guys. Wildcats have won 3 straight. We'll see what happens for them tomorrow. That's a little scarier game than you thought a couple weeks ago. So I think it's very important for Arkansas to build some cushion, win this game tomorrow, win next week in Norman, set yourself up when the SEC gets a little more difficult when you're halfway through.
And then, again, we're a little over a third of the way through, so still some time to settle in. But we look this weekend, and it feels like everyone wants to tell you tomorrow is one of those stereotypical trap games. Snowstorm on its way. Students might not be available. Tip-off time got pushed up. Do you remember any games that are kind of like this in your past? I know you tweeted about a good one earlier today. What do you remember about when the weather has to, make a say and push up games and change what's going to happen?
Yeah, the Ronnie Brewer game in 2006 stands out. Arkansas won in overtime. That was the eventual national champion, Florida Gators, Torian Green, Lee Humphrey. You had Al Horford, Joakim Noah, and I forget, and Corey Brewer. I mean, that team was stacked. And I want to say Mo Spates was their 6th man. And Arkansas got the better of them that day. They were a top 10 team, and Razorbacks took them down. There was a game, Courtney Fortson scored like 33 in the second half. He had only 2 points in the first half. There's been other games over the years, but just remembering what it was like to be on campus at a day or a night like this, and I know you alluded to the game being moved up. That is such a fun setup to be a freshman, really any undergrad graduate at the U of A, because you're going to be predominantly the fan base that's in that arena. The players are going to be super happy to see you. And it's just against a crummy opponent. You kind of wish it would get a better opponent, but you might have a chance to blow the doors off these guys tomorrow and get some walk-ons in. So I can't wait to see what it looks like tomorrow. I'm hoping the students take advantage of this opportunity.
I think they should. What's their best way to get there? Again, like Arkansas came out with something earlier today, and it was kind of their guidelines for tomorrow. There's no university transit, so buses won't be available. Parking first come first serve. So if you have a car, you might as well go as early as you can. Doors open at 2:30 p.m. Would you like sled down the hills? How would you get there if you were an undergrad right now?
Do it very slowly and cautiously, because I think all of us that have either gone to school there or been on the campus have busted our keisters at least once. So I would plan on getting there earlier or leaving earlier than maybe you anticipated. Driving on the roads, they're going to be slick. Just be cautious and hope that nothing bad happens. That sounds like for example, I elected not to drive to Northwest Arkansas. I just didn't think it was a smart thing to do. My car's got over 200,000 miles on it. I elected that, you know what, I want to go to this game, but it's probably better if I just watch it from home. So hopefully those that do attend and that are out on the roads, they are just safe, because that's the biggest thing in a weekend like this. You just want people to be safe.
And I think it's one thing, again, look, I grew up in New Jersey, so like I'm accustomed to snow like this and weather like this. This is nothing for me. I mean, yeah, 12 to 16 inches, as Dan Scoff is saying. A shout out to him. He was featured on a Yeehog commercial last night, a social media
I
post,
saw
which
that.
is kind of crazy.
$1 wells.
I've been making sure that I've told everyone in the newsroom, I'm like, Dan, you're famous when it comes to the college bars, which is really funny, but absolutely irrelevant when it comes to the point of our podcast today. But might as well throw it in and give him a shout out.
He's a good guy. The only problem with him is just his Sooners fan. We could do without that, but other than that, Dan's a good guy.
That matters, especially next week on Tuesday when the Hogs play the Sooners. He's also a Packers fan, which I'm a Bears fan, so I don't like that. But back to my actual point about the snow, like it is hard enough when it's in the Northeast and you're accustomed and growing up to it. Like I've spun out on my way home from school back in high school when I was driving, and here it's even worse because there's no plows, there's no salt, there's no nothing to get the roads ready to go. There are plows. I should take that back. Apparently there's like 60 plows or something. I don't know. People were telling me in the newsroom today. I was like, I'll believe it when I see them on the road. I've yet to see a plow or some salt. But it's always, you've got to be extra cautious, and I think you're absolutely right. Otherwise, someone is going to, have an ambulance called, and it's going to be a news story on our 10 o'clock newscast tomorrow night, which is not anything that we hope for.
You see weekend like this, and you're like, oh, that's another Saturday in New Jersey. I'm used to this, and we freak out like it's like we've never seen it before, and it looks pretty bad based on what Dan and others are saying. So hopefully it'll be lesser than what it actually is, but who knows?
Hey, the best meteorologists are only right. I think the stat is like 20% of the time. So I'm not saying they're bad, but I'm just saying you never know what happens. Let's move on. Let's get into this LSU matchup. What do you like for the Arkansas Razorbacks as they take on this LSU team that's 13-6 and 1-5 in conference play?
They're playing a team that, as you mentioned, there's only won one game, but they played some close ones. The Kentucky game didn't go their way. I know McMahon's still probably salty about that. There's questions in Baton Rouge. Will Wade come back to coach that basketball team? I know there's a lot of speculation there. I hope Arkansas doesn't take this team lightly, because otherwise it's going to be a game in the second half based on what you've seen from LSU. And I wonder, do we see that new starting lineup again? I tend to think that DJ is going to come off the bench. It'll be that setup once again. And you have a luxury if you're Cal. You've got a lot of firepower and mixing things up either on the starting rotation or what the coming off the bench looks like. So I think that's what I'm going to monitor. And I know Cal said a couple weeks ago he wanted to try and feature Malik Ewan and Nick Pringle together more. Didn't see that. You correct me if I'm wrong. We didn't see that in the Vandy game. I wonder if we'll see it in this game tomorrow.
I think there's a good chance too, and that's kind of where I was going to go next. Of outside of Darius Acuff Jr., right? Like we see this team's at its best when 5 guys score. Who do you want to see kind of step up production tomorrow and have a good get back on track game? It felt like DJ finally had that a couple of nights ago. Carter played really well. Who's that player that you want to see? And maybe it's like Isaiah Sealy, who comes off the bench late in the game because it's a blowout.
Yeah, I think he would be one that you would love to see score in the double digits. But I'll go Nick Pringle, because I think Nick has been criticized pretty heavy by Razorback fans, even though I feel like he's a steady hand in that locker room, a leader. And is he the most gifted offensively? No, but you're going to need him in March. And Nick needs to be fully confident. He's played a lot of college basketball. I know Cal shared that story with him at his house the other day, asked him how he was doing. He's like, Coach, I'm fine. I'm good. I know that's what Cal said, and hopefully that's the case, because if Arkansas is going to have any postseason success, you have to have some abnormal games from Pringle and Ewan. Ewan showed you he's gifted offensively, but you would like to see Nick have some better games, especially as we get closer to what really matters, which is the SEC and NCAA tournament.
On the topic of Ewan, would you like to see him shoot a little bit more from beyond the arc? Or I know he's been great kind of in that mid-range early on game, but we saw him over the summer take some threes and make threes in that practice that we were all invited to. Is that something you'd like to see? So maybe he could stretch the floor a little bit more at the 4 if TB needs a break?
I think he's 1 for 1 on the season, isn't he? He hit that in either the Auburn game or the Georgia game, if memory serves me correct. I think it's whatever Cal expects. I mean, you can have 5-out situations with him on the floor. Can't initially do that with Nick Pringle. I think that at least brings the big men out, and Malik can take him to the rim at times and try and drive and either get his own or find a teammate, because Malik's a really gifted passer. I think we've seen that this season. So I think it's all in accordance with what Cal's trying to do with him. And if you say, like, Malik, I trust you to take some long balls, and yeah, go ahead. If he doesn't want him taking it, then I would not suggest doing that, because then you're probably going to get pulled and not play for a few minutes.
He is 2 for 2 to correct.
2 for 2.
To get that correct stat, he is 2 for 2 from beyond the arc. Don't ask me which game specifically. I don't know, but let's wrap up a couple more on basketball before we take a quick break and talk some football. We won't talk to each other before this Oklahoma game. Again, how important is it to go 2-0 in these next 2 games? Because Oklahoma is a very beatable team on the road for this Arkansas team, to set yourself up for, in my opinion, College game day potentially coming to town next Saturday for Kentucky.
Yeah, and it was like that a couple years ago in Muss's last year. And if Kentucky wins on Saturday, and maybe I don't remember if the Wildcats have a midweek game or not, and then you look at what Arkansas could do against 2 beatable opponents, as you alluded to, these next 2 games. You should win both these games. And then you should be 6-2 heading into the Kentucky game before your 6-day bye, before you play Mississippi State, I believe, the following weekend. So I think, to have an opportunity, if you want to set it up for the first half of the schedule, the next 2 games you should win. And I know people think that Arkansas is going to blow out Kentucky. That's going to be a war. And the Wildcats are kind of in a situation where Arkansas is this past year, where no one expected them to go into Rupp and win. It's not necessarily that extent with Kentucky coming in here based on them playing a little bit better, but it's still, a lot of people are expecting the Razorbacks to win that basketball game. So you could be 9-2 at the halfway point of the league. That's very feasible because you've got the Wildcats at home. You've got 2 bad teams on the road. So as we talked about earlier, Ev, if you get to that, with the back end of your schedule a little more difficult, or really the second to back half part really in February, then you're going to be a high seed heading into Nashville. Won't have to play till Friday. And then you set yourself up to be a high seed in the NCAA tournament based on what you accomplished in SEC play and getting those 2 big-time non-conference wins.
Finishing out the month strong, that's the most important thing right now. If you're the Razorbacks, 2-1, you're happy. 1-2, you're pretty dang upset. Ty, let's take a quick break really quickly. Did we miss anything on basketball? Any last words before we take this break?
I don't think so, man. I think we hit it pretty good.
I think we did too. All right, when we come back, we head to the Gridiron, talk some football. Hog Roundup returns after this. Back here on the Hog Roundup, that's Ty Richardson. I'm Evan Camico. Pre-Snowstorm show Saturday. We've talked plenty of basketball already if you missed it. And if you're just joining us now, go check us out on YouTube and all of our social medias. Watch that segment. Promise you it's worth it. Ty, let's talk some football before we talk about the national championship game. Let's talk about Arkansas. This recruiting class seems pretty much good to go. And it's probably better than what most Arkansas fans were thinking. Definitely what we were thinking last week, where they are in the top 10 in the country if you look at 24/7. What do you make of what Ryan Silverfield has been able to do?
Yeah, I think people are excited about when they see a top 10 ranking from On3, and it's encouraging to a fan base that has had not just a difficult time, but a brutal time this past year. And now you see if these guys can play. We'll get spring ball. Guys won't be transferring out because of the new portal cycle, and hopefully knock on wood, there's no injuries there. And surely before we know it, it's going to be September, and you'll see what this team does at Razorback Stadium. And then, man, what a stretch. Utah on the road in Salt Lake. And then, oh, by the way, you probably welcome in the best football program in the last 5 years in Georgia. So that is a stretch to open your season. I know it's a Kyle Whittingham list Utah program, but that Salt Lake trip is not an easy one for Arkansas.
Regardless, I think even if that game was going to be home, it would be the same sentiment of like, well, yeah, sure, it's no Kyle Whittingham because he's now in Michigan, but it's still Utah, and it's still, you know, the likes and the essence of Kyle Whittingham's program because their head coach was their defensive coordinator. Correct me if I'm wrong. From last season. So, and then like you mentioned, Georgia, who, in my opinion, like I had Georgia going to the national championship game this year. I think a lot of people probably did as well. But they fell flat and fell to Georgia. I wouldn't say fell flat. It was a great game against Georgia, but fell short of their goal. So it's not going to be easy in year one for Silverfield, but way too early, right? Like, if it wants to be a successful year one for Silverfield, now that we know a little bit more about the roster, who's joining KJ Jackson on the offense, the guys that are surrounding Quincy Rhodes Jr. on defense, what are kind of the little things that you want to see from this Arkansas program so that you can say, okay, I do have faith that they can? Because we'll talk about it in a minute, and that's the big point next of, did Indiana ruin college football for everybody? But what do you think about the little things that Arkansas has to do well next year to be like, all right, Silverfield's on the right path forward?
I would say turnover margin's a big thing, considering how much the Razorbacks struggled, not just forcing them, but holding on to the football, all of it. So if they are less mistake prone, then that's a good sign, a good hope. And penalties wise, I don't remember where they stacked up in penalties last season. I think it was like lower third. It wasn't great, if I remember that correctly. So those two things I would point to, turnover margin and penalties, that at least goes to show you, it's like we complain about the coaching the last few years. Well, that you're trending in the right direction. Is that going to lead to an 8-4 season? Probably not, but you'd love to be at least bowl eligible. I don't know how they're going to get there with this schedule, just to be blunt, but that's where I would point to, Evan.
Yeah, I think I completely agree with that. It's mistake-free, and we saw that Monday night in the national championship game. You had one team who didn't make mistakes all season long in Miami who made a lot of mistakes in that game. You could point to 4 or 5, and that's why my Indiana Hoosiers are the national champions of 2026. I can't believe I just uttered those words on a podcast, Ty. It's pretty mind-blowing that Indiana has won a national championship in football. But I want to ask you, like, you watched the game Monday night. Does this screw over the entirety of college football that Indiana is the national champion and Curt Cignetti took, and I will say it, the worst football program in college football to the top of the mountain in 2 years? Does it screw over the game of college football?
No, it should just incentivize boosters or ADs or head coaches. It's like, hey, we can't make excuses to our fans about a 4-year project. Because this guy did it in 1 year, 11-2, and then the next year they won it all. I think the model, I said this today on our show, the model for Arkansas football is not Indiana. Like, it's just not going to happen. Let's be honest. But it's Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt was in football purgatory for years. And yeah, you had a little bit of James Franklin here and there, but Clark Lee took over. I remember laughing at him at SEC Media Days. Just being blunt, laughing. Well, who's now laughing now? They had a Heisman Trophy runner-up. They had a 10-2 season. They should have, in my opinion, gone to the college football playoff. And Nashville's a popping place. Heck, they flipped a kid that was going to Georgia. So you've got, is Northwest Arkansas an attractive place? You're a resident. I think so.
Yeah.
Is it Nashville? Probably not. But if Fayetteville, U.S. News doesn't rank it at the top just because it's a great town to live in. And there are elements to this football program that I would look at what Vanderbilt's been able to accomplish. And there's what I would go. Indiana didn't ruin college football. They've only helped it, in my opinion.
See, I almost will. I'm going to counter that because I am going to say, yes, I do think in a sense they did ruin college football a bit because I think you've now set unrealistic expectations for every year one college football coach. If you're a power program right now, you're looking at Indiana and saying, I completely agree with everything you just said, Ty. Like, I think that's a great point that you make. But on the flip side, you're looking at Indiana and saying, man, if this team could do it, they hired the right guy, and in 2 years, they're at the top. every timeline on these new coaches now, the expectation isn't, oh, I need 3 to 4 years to build a roster. And I'm curious, like, if you know the answer to this, you brought up Clark Lee. It took him a couple of years to get Vanderbilt to where they were this year, right? Like, if you look at the case study around college football, how many teams can we say flipped their roster and became a national title contender in 1 year?
No, that's a good point. I think this was his third season. It might be fourth. You might have to double check me on that. And that's why that's why I also wanted to like steer people away from the Indiana comparison, because Razorback football is just not going to get to double-digit wins in year one. There's no way, shape, or form. I hope I can recant this at the end of the year, but I feel very strongly in that. And so do so many others. I think Ryan Silverfield was being honest with us. He would probably tell us the same thing. He's like, I don't think we can get there. Now, I hope in his heart of hearts he feels like he can, and he's got the coaches and the players to do so. But I think that's wishful thinking. I think that's a pipe dream. But and you're hoping that window that he has, and again, you got to show progress. It can't be one of those things where you go 3-9 this season. That's not giving anyone hope at all. You've got the games at home, Tennessee, LSU at the tail end of the year, Georgia week 3. What if you win that game in Salt Lake City? Just imagine. Do I think they're going to? No. It was the same thing I said about the Ole Miss game. What if you win that Ole Miss game week 3 this past year? You send a signal to every SEC opponent, this is a different team. Now, they did what they did all season long. They choked in the fourth quarter and lost the football game. But if you go to Salt Lake City, Utah, and win that one, and you've got the number one program in the last 5 years coming to your town, and that's how you get a fan base excited.
Yeah.
And it's a tall task, but it's at least there for the taking.
Because it's the argument of last year and the comparison with Indiana, where in 2024, we're sitting there like, oh, man, are they really real? Nebraska comes to town. People forget that Nebraska team was ranked top 25. They were like 24 in the country right then. And it had, Big Noon Kickoff was there that morning. And we were like, is this Indiana team legit? Is the hope real? And obviously now we've seen where that went. And the answer was yes. And here we are. They had a great year one, built off it in year two. So it's a lot of kind of interesting comparison game of like, you can look at the model, but it kind of breaks college football in the sense of there's now going to be an unrealistic expectation around Arkansas fans for Silverfield being like, he needs to win in year one. Otherwise, he's on the hot seat in year two, and we're redoing this whole thing in 3 years. And I think that's not fair to everybody outside of the game, but that's where we are, and it's the unfortunate part of the game. Ty, anything else really quickly before we take one final break before a quick wrap of the show?
I feel happy for you. I feel happy for my buddy Connor O'Gara. Phil Elson, while I didn't graduate from the Indiana, he's the first one to tell you that. I'm not making fun of him, but anyone with a connection from Bloomington, just to go through all that turmoil, all that travesty, all those years, now to experience football zenith, I applaud you, and I wish I could have that same feeling.
Hopefully, it's going to happen here soon in Arkansas. All right, one quick break, and we'll be right back to wrap up the show. Back here to wrap up shop on the Hog Roundup. We don't have much to talk about. Gymnastics took care of business today. You've got women's basketball who continues to struggle, but let's save all those conversations for a later date. Ty, we've got about 45 seconds left. Curious for you, the snow is coming in. What's your favorite activity to do when it snows?
It's got to be sledding. And I don't know if I'm going to be brave enough to venture out this weekend, but I can remember in our old neighborhood at Little Rock going up to the top of this massive hill and just riding on that sled for hours and hours and doing all these things, whether it's there in Little Rock doing fun stuff in college as well. Snow days are the best, and I hope everyone has a safe and fun weekend.
Safety first is a priority. I've almost been hit by car sledding before on snow. There's a lot of things, a lot of weird things that go on in New Jersey. Everything, everything weird happens in New Jersey, as somebody has once said. But that's going to do it for our show this week. As always, thank you for tuning in. That's Ty Richardson. I'm Evan Kamiko. The Hog Roundup returns next week. A big one, Arkansas taking on Kentucky. We'll preview that later next week. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week.